It's me, Catherine Endy, the Family Life Coach, and today I'm going to talk with you briefly about why it's so important to understand your child's brain. Now, you might be wondering what this even has to do with parenting, but I have found that when you understand what's going on inside your child's brain and how their brain is developing, it makes parenting so much easier in the sense that you can meet your child's needs more effectively. So I'm going to give you a teeny tiny little preview of one of the workshops in my Calm, Confident, and Conscious Parents workshop series. And that workshop is called Understanding Your Child's Brain so you can more effectively manage their behavior. So I want to start by saying that when we were growing up, our parents didn't have this information. This information about the brain is relatively new in the last generation because when we were growing up, there was no such thing as the MRI or the fMRI, or I should say when our parents were growing up. This was invented in the last 20 or 30 years, and so prior to that, it was not possible for medical professionals and neuroscientists to look inside the brain in quite the same way that we can look inside the brain now. At least inside like a live, human thinking, operating, working brain. So we have new information, like being able to look inside the brain of a live human person helped scientists to understand how brains develop and what's going on inside the brain when certain things are happening. So, for example, now we understand more about the stress response system. We understand what's going on inside the brain when a human gets stressed. So this helps us to understand why we act the way we do and why our children act the way they do. So for me, I found that when I learned this information about the brain, I was better able to understand my kids' behaviors and meet them where they were at and meet their needs more effectively. So what I want to say about this is that the part of the brain that regulates our emotions and is responsible for planning and language and considering other people's feelings, considering what other people's experience is, all of those kinds of things are functions of the prefrontal cortex, which is this part of the brain right here behind your forehead. Now, the reason this is important is this is where all the human stuff happens. That's where all of the thinking and logic and reasoning and all the stuff that makes us human, that sets us apart from other mammals, all of that happens in the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex it's there when children are little, but it's not fully developed. It's not fully wired up. And so they have a prefrontal cortex, but they're not really able to use it. When I say they, I mean young children. They're not really able to access that part of their brain as much as we are as adults. And in fact, you may know that that part of the brain is not fully developed until about your mid-20s. And so even a teenager is not really able to access their prefrontal cortex all the time, which is why teenagers tend to have trouble organizing things, making lists, prioritizing, and understanding a schedule and keeping time and things like that. When we're talking about little kids, this really manifests as difficulty regulating their emotions in stressful times. And the truth is that many things that happen throughout a normal day can be very stressful for a little person. So when they get hungry, this is really dysregulating, right? I know when I get hungry, I can get, you've heard the term hangry, right? We can get really emotionally dysregulated when we feel hungry. And other kinds of stressors, even something as trivial seeming as you cut the sandwich wrong, or you gave them the wrong color cup, or you put their socks on the wrong way. All of these kinds of things that seem very trivial to us can be very dysregulating to a little brain. And if you have a particularly sensitive child, this is going to be even more the case. And so I think that understanding where all of this is coming from and understanding where your child is coming from because of their brain really helps to bring a lot more compassion, a lot more empathy, and a lot more understanding to the parenting relationship, because unlike the way our parents thought about us, now we know that our child is not doing things on purpose to make us angry. They're not being manipulative. They're not being defiant because they are choosing to make you angry. In fact, they're doing those things that we interpret that way because they literally can't help it. They literally cannot do the thing we're asking them to do. They cannot regulate their emotions, and they cannot ask nicely. Like when they get into a dysregulated state, they are actually incapable of asking nicely or being kind or apologizing. Those kinds of things that require emotion regulation, that require accessing that prefrontal part of the brain, those things are unavailable to them when they're in upset. So I think this is really important to understand, because we tend to be very reactive to our kids' behavior that seems purposefully unkind or seems purposefully disrespectful or defiant. And when we can understand that they're not doing it on purpose, they're doing it because they can't do better, I think this lends a whole new set of options to our parenting toolbox. And I will see you soon.